the world's writers will walk through those gates. And if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, but real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important, we have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
Hello, I'm Ian Rankin. I've been with the Edinburgh International Book Festival basically since day one. I went as a student, as a reader, as a fan of writing. Later on, I was invited to go as an author, which was a thrill. And it's a spectacular experience. It's a meeting of minds. It's a way to open your mind to new experiences, to new ideas, nuanced debate, entertainment, something for every age group. And that's what keeps me going back year after year after year. Long may it continue.
Welcome to the online Edinburgh International Book Festival. I'm Shehadeh, a lawyer and writer, speaking to you from my home in Ramallah, Palestine. This event is sponsored by the Booker Prize Foundation. We thank them for their support. I will be discussing with Colum McCann his new novel, Apeirogon. We speak for about 45 minutes. Colum will do a short reading, and then we'll have time for your questions. Colum McCann is one of my favorite authors. I'm not a great reader of fiction, but whenever Colum publishes a new novel, I immediately grab it and begin reading, and I'm never disappointed. His latest novel, the subject of our discussion today, is his most ambitious and is one of the most important and innovative novels to be published this year. Colum is the author of 7 novels and 3 collections of stories. Born and raised in Dublin, Ireland, he has been the recipient of many international honors, including the National Book Award, the International Dublin Impact Prize, as well as other European awards and the Oscar nomination and an Oscar nomination. In 2017, he was elected to the American Academy of Arts. He is one of the co-founders of the nonprofit Global Story Exchange Organization, Narrative 4, and he teaches at the MFA program in Hunter College. His latest novel, Apeirogon, is the subject of our discussion this evening, has been longlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize. This novel is based on the experience of Bassam Armin, a Palestinian, and Rami an Israeli, who both lose their daughters when the girls are still young. Bassam's 10-year-old Abir is killed when an Israeli soldier shoots her in the head, and 14-year-old Smadar by a Palestinian bomber. These two men are united in grief by personal tragedy. The events of the novel take place in the course of one day in 2016. Fragment 1 begins with Rami in the morning in Jerusalem, and the sentence, "The hills of Jerusalem are a bath of fog," and ends with Bassam at night in Jericho, and the sentence, "The hills of Jericho are a bath of dark." In between is a whole world shattered into 1001 fragments that tells the story of these two men and sheds more light on the conflict raging in this land than any novel I've read. It is as though Colum has taken the story of these two men, a Palestinian and an Israeli, blew it apart into 1001 pieces, and then gathered the pieces into this book, this Apeirogon. The word Apeirogon means a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. Would you like to say more about introduce your novel, Colum, in your own words? You'll do it better than I do.
I don't know if I can do it better than you do. Can I say, first of all, Raja, you're in Ramallah, I'm in New York. We're all sort of in Edinburgh at the same time too. You're one of my heroes, one of my literary heroes, one of my heroes as an activist and a thinker and a person who's been, instrumental in so many ways in guiding people towards, understanding in your land. So it's an incredible honor for me to have a chance to sit here and chat with you. And you were one of the first people that I thought of when I sort of embarked on this book. I mean, I wanted to write a book that somebody like Raja Shehadeh would read, would sort of understand and perhaps even provoke in certain ways. And that was one of the things, because when I embarked on this book, I was a little scared, I was a little frightened. I came to you in Ramallah when early on when I met you with PalFest, a wonderful festival of literature. And met you in Ramallah, and then met you then after that. And it was always fantastic to read your work, to be inspired by your work, and to think that this novel might eventually get into your hands one day. It all came from Narrative 4, the non-profit organization that I co-founded with Lisa Consiglio and other writers and activists around the world. We bring young people together to tell stories to one another. We went on a trip, musicians, writers, activists, and at the end of a 10-day long trip, I ended up in Beit Jala, which you know well, is right beside Jerusalem, right beside Bethlehem. Up the stairs into a little room, and two men were sitting there, two ordinary men, or so it seemed at first. Rami El-Hanan and Bassam Aramin, and they sat down and they told me their stories. And within half an hour, my world was cleaved entirely open by listening to them. I was changed. I was changed by the notion of what they had to say, which was that this is how my daughter died, and this is how my daughter died. We need to know one another. We need to talk to one another. This will not be over until we talk. This is complicated. This is messy. And yet it is extraordinarily necessary for us, these two men, Bassam and Rami, to tell these stories. I went away, as you know, I'm from Ireland. I went away, went to New York and sat down and thought, I can't do this. How can I do this? And what right do I have to do this as well? That was one of the questions that, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. But writers, I think we work towards our obsessions, and this became an obsession for me. And I wanted to write about these beautiful men. They're courageous. They're kind. They go places they shouldn't go. They say things that they probably shouldn't say. They annoy people. They open people's hearts, and they go around the world, and they continue to use the force of their grief as a weapon. And the reason I reference Scheherazade, or 1001 little cantos or chapters in which the book is written, is that I realized early on that Rami and Bassam were telling the stories of their daughters because they wanted to keep them alive. So it was a Scheherazade gesture, if you will, that they were embarked on. And they have kept the memory of their daughters alive. And they've also opened up so many other people to look at what is going on over there in sort of new and profound ways. So that was it. It was a 5 year journey.
Did growing up in Ireland and having family from Northern Ireland influence how you wrote this novel?
Yeah. My mum's from Derry. I was born in Dublin. My dad's from Dublin, and every summer we'd get on a bus, and we get on the bus in Dublin and go up through Armagh and on the way to the farm in Derry. We get stopped in Armagh. The soldiers would get on the bus. We get stopped at checkpoints. There were things going on when I was 8, 9 years old in the mid 70s that I didn't understand. Bombings, the Miami show band murders, things like that were there. And as a young man, I used to sort of scratch my head and wonder what it was that was going on around us. I do think that being Irish and having access to stories and storytelling, also having a particular access to that part of the world, and imaginative access to that part of the world, helped. And also, I have to say, one of the great surprises at the end of the 20th century, and one of the great stories of the 20th century, 21st century, was the Irish peace process. And so much that happened there. It's 22 years old now, still shaky at times, but it's there. But if you'd have told me, Raj, when I was, in the 1970s or the 1980s, that we would have a relatively stable peace, I would have shook my head. I think most people would have shook their head. And peace, Yeats says that peace comes dropping slowly, but sometimes peace comes along with an extraordinary force and surprises us, as in, the fall of the Berlin Wall, as in many things that Rami and Bassam talk about. But my connection as an Irish person, particularly to Bassam in Jericho and in East Jerusalem, particularly to his experience, was very powerful. And the fact that they let me into their story was also that they trusted me with their story. I went to them and said, I would like to write a book about you guys. And they were like, okay. And I said, but I want to write a novel. I want to imagine it. And they were like, okay. And I just thought that was extraordinarily generous and brave. But the thing about it is, the more I went along, is that they have any form of bravery in their lives. They have endured the hardest thing possible, which was losing a child. And after that, they could endure anything that they wanted. People imagining them in any sort of ways. People calling them names. People, trying to change their stories. But no, they live with the force of a peculiar truth and a deep sort of honesty that just comes about by them saying, "Hi, my name is Bassam Aramin. I'm from Jericho. I was born in El Khalil, and I lost my daughter." Or, "Hi, my name is Rami El Hanan. I was born in Jerusalem, and I lost my daughter Smadar when she was 13, almost 14 years old." There's a power in that I find extraordinary.
In Transatlantic, your novel, you integrated real people. In that case, George Mitchell. Was it more difficult to do in this novel? If so, why?
Yeah, it was more difficult. First of all, George Mitchell is a public figure. So too was Frederick Douglass, who I also wrote about in that novel. So too were Alcock and Brown, who were the guys who flew the first transatlantic flight across the ocean. Rami and Bassam, even though they're relatively public, were much more private, and I had to sort of go into their the intricacies of their lives. But it was crazy. It was I went to Jerusalem and Jericho, and first of all, the hospitality I received was extraordinary. But I traveled on Rami's motorbike. I went in Bassam's car. I walked through checkpoints with him. We walked in the hills. We sat down in restaurants. We talked and talked and talked, and they gave me access to things that, quite frankly, they had never told anybody else in their lives. And so I had a responsibility to the truth, but I also have a responsibility to the reader, because I want the reader of this book to feel the power of their stories. And Rami has read the book, and he's been incredibly complimentary, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But Bassam hasn't read the book, and I'm also deeply grateful for that, because it's too hard for him to read, and he said that on numerous occasions. But he allowed me space into his life, and I did get a phone call from Rami at one stage. This is kind of funny. He said to me, I'm reading about myself on the motorbike there. And I have one thing to tell you, you have me on the wrong motorbike. And I'm like, I know. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, your motorbike, and it's true, he has a 650, I think, Suzuki, or BMW, sorry. And he drives really fast and goes around, but it's an automatic. And in the novel, I put him on a bike with gears, simply because I wanted the reader to feel the jolt of the motorbike as it goes through the streets. Like when he hits the clutch, when he touches the foot pedal. I want the reader to be actually on the bike, to be in the moment of the movement. So there's a certain amount of fiction there, trying to get to the truth of the experience of what it might be like to be Rami El-Hanan, what it might be like to be Bassam Aramin, and to have lost their girls, and also to communicate, frankly, some of their hope. This sounds like, I don't want it to sound like a downer. Two men who've lost their daughters go around the world. Somehow they manage to cultivate, in the face of all available evidence, they cultivate this joy. They laugh with one another. They have jokes where when they go traveling. You can see them. There's a photo in the book of them traveling on a train in Germany, with their heads on one another's shoulders. They are the closest people, and they should not be close. Or so some people say. They would say we have every right to be close, but some people would say, well, you're Palestinian, you're Israeli, you can't have that friendship. And this is not a twee friendship. This is a complicated, messy, available, conscious friendship that these men have decided to have with one another for the greater good of dialogue and hopefully of understanding as well.
Bassam tells YA, which is the name that you give to the killer of his little girl, Abir, you're the victim here, not me. Could you elucidate?
That's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? I mean,
I thought that was extraordinary, and I wanted more explanation of that.
So here's the deal. Let me just give a little bit of background. Bassam is Palestinian. He's 17 years old. And he finds these blood grenades, which he and his friends throw in under an Israeli jeep. He gets sent off to prison for 7 years, where he becomes commander of the Fatah unit in the prison. While in the prison, he reads about the Holocaust. He has a changing idea into the idea of what we have to talk about and how we have to understand one another. He gets out of prison. He, along with a number of other Palestinians and Israelis, they found a group called Combatants for Peace. It's a really brave thing to do. They get together. Shortly, a couple of years after, he's the founder of Combatants for Peace. His daughter, Abir, gets shot in the back of the head from a very close distance with a rubber bullet. And when he very bravely takes his daughter's killer to civil court, he goes up to him in court and says, "You are the victim here, not me and not my daughter." And what he was saying goes so profoundly into history. It goes so profoundly into forgiveness. It goes so profoundly into grief and all of these different things that are taking place in his soul, in his history, in his heart. But for him to do that, to say that you have become the victim of history, you have become the victim of occupation, you have become the victim of a political system, you have become the victim of ideas, you've become the victim of time and money and all of these different things. When he said that to his daughter's killer, I knew that I was in the presence of somebody who is profoundly engaged and wise and prepared to put things on the line. Also, I have to say that when he went to Senator John Kerry's office in Washington, D.C., he sat down and he looked at Senator Kerry and he said, "I'm very sorry to tell you this, Senator Kerry, but you murdered my daughter." And what he meant by this was it was an American-made Jeep, it was an American-made rubber bullet, it was an American-made rifle that fired it into the back of her head. And so for him to say those things, he also talks a lot about forgiveness, and he talks about meeting in a field, that we can come together in a field and learn from one another. And I'll finish with this. One of the most profound things I think that Bassam says and Rami said is, look, we need to know each other above ground. Let's get to know each other above ground, because if we don't know each other above ground, guess what? We're going to know each other 6 feet below ground. And so let's give it a chance to know one another above ground first. That's a really brave thing, as you know, and a difficult thing to say in today's world.
Now, Rami says at some point in the novel, we must end the occupation and then sit down together to figure it out. 1 state, 2 states, it doesn't matter at this stage, just end the occupation and then begin the process of rebuilding the possibility of dignity for all of us. And this is the end of the quote. Don't you think there is a limit to what dialogue can achieve?
Yeah, I think there's a limit to what dialogue can achieve. If dialogue for the sake of dialogue is the ruin of the soul. But dialogue towards action is profoundly important. And what they're saying is, we're not just going to sit around and talk. We're not just going to sit around and have kumbaya, airy-fairy in the background sort of stuff going on. No, what we really want to do is we want to understand one another so that we can change things on the ground. And so, Rami and Bassam, they don't talk about 1 state, 2 state, 8 states, federation, confederation, these sort of things. They're not didactic. They know that this stuff is messy. They know it's complicated. But one of the elemental things that they know is that, it won't be over until we begin to understand one another. Now, if I could communicate to people who haven't been, say, in Beit Jala, or Ramallah, or Beit Zahur, or wherever, what it's like to meet the young people there, to meet these young Palestinians who are in the coffee shops talking about ideas and music and listening to extraordinary things. The imaginative capital that I met in that country was so extraordinary that I'm pretty sure that it would top the Forbes list for capital if capital were and it should be thought of as imagination and creativity. I hate to say this, but very few people know that. Very few people know that, you know, you can go to, say, Ramallah and have your heart blown open by these brilliant, optimistic, powerful young women, young men who are saying and doing things. But we have this idea, you know, we have this one unidirectional idea of what a Palestinian should be. Also, a unidirectional idea of what an Israeli can and could be. And I met extraordinary people when I was traveling around Israel too. And the most important thing to me, Raja, is to acknowledge the fact that it's messy and contradictory. And I don't know any solution, but I do know one thing. We need to care about the person right next to us. We need to care about what they think and what they say. And once we do that, we have much less chance of slamming a missile or a bullet into the middle of nowhere. It's not necessarily a good thing to know your enemy, because if you know your enemy, it's not the same form of war.
Maybe it's a good time to take off for a while and do the reading.
I'm so happy. So the book, thank you. The book is in 1,001 cantos, and I felt a bit like a musician when I was trying to pull it all together. The book was a bit weird to write, to be honest, because like things came at me, and time and time again, sometimes I didn't even know where they were coming from. But then I structured it in 1,001 cantos. It goes from 1 to 500, and then 500 down to 1. The idea being that possibly the book could be read backwards too. But in the very middle sits a section that really gives the whole plot away. Also, it reveals, and maybe we can talk about this after the reading, which will take about 2 minutes. It reveals who the narrator of the book is. So, 1001. Once upon a time, and not so long ago, and not so far away, Rami Elhanan, an Israeli, a Jew, a graphic artist, husband of Nurit, father of Elik and Guy and Yigal, father too of the late Smadar, traveled on his motorbike from the suburbs of Jerusalem to the Crimson Monastery in the mainly Christian town of Beit Jala, near Bethlehem, in the Judean hills, to meet with Bassam Aramin, a Palestinian, a Muslim, a former prisoner, an activist, born near Hebron, husband of Salwa, father of Arab and Areen and Muhammad and Ahmed and Hiba, father too of the late Abir, 10 years old, shot dead by an unnamed Israeli border guard in East Jerusalem almost a decade after Rami's daughter, Smadar, 2 weeks away from 14, was killed in the western part of the city by 3 Palestinian suicide bombers, Bashar Sawala, Youssef Shuli, and Tawfiq Yassin, from the village of Asira al-Shamaliya near Nablus in the West Bank, a place of intrigue to the listeners gathered in the red brick monastery, perched on the hillside, in the mountains of the beloved, by the terraced vineyard, in the shadow of the wall, having come from as far apart as Belfast and Kyushu, Paris and North Carolina, Santiago and Brooklyn, Copenhagen and Terezin, on an ordinary day at the end of October, foggy, tinged with cold, to listen to the stories of Bassam and Rami, and to find within the stories another story, a song of songs, discovering themselves, you and me, in the stone child chapel where we sit for hours, eager, hopeless, buoyed, confused, cynical, complicit, silent, our memories imploding, our synapses skipping, in the gathering dark, remembering while listening all of those stories that are yet to be told.
It's beautiful, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And so in that moment, And it was almost 2 years into it, Raja, when I finally realized who the narrator was. Now, I don't know if this is a big revelation or not. I'm still trying to figure it out. When I realized that the reader was the narrator, it wasn't just me, it wasn't just some sort of omniscient, figure out there, but that the reader herself was the narrator of the book. It hit me with the force of an axe, really, and afterwards I began to think, well, maybe that's every book. I mean, is it every book? Do we become the narrator of every single book that we read? But for me, I consciously sort of made the reader into the narrator by saying, you and me, we sit together in this stone tiled chapel. And you've probably been there, right? Have you been in the monastery
I have, yes. Yeah, and it's a beautiful place.
That's cool.
I think the structure of your book is great and so exciting. And I'm afraid that people who do not read the whole thing and read only the first part might feel that you are biased to one side or the other. And it's important to read the whole thing and see the whole structure and how it works, and read about all the details that you have, which are amazing, a mass of detail. Really,
Yeah.
I think it's a very innovative structure.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's incredibly important. Michael Ondaatje, he says in The Skin of a Lion, the first sentence of every novel should be, trust me, give it time. There is order here, very faint, very human. And what he does, and he is so brilliant, he's one of my great heroes. He allows the music to build and build and build and build and build. And that's what I hope will happen with people who read the novel. I hope people will give the novel time. It's also like one of the things that I tried to do a little bit was be a little bit confusing, because frankly, I was kind of confused myself. And you live there, and you've lived through and written the most extraordinary books about that part of the world. But for those of us who come in sort of from outside, it's very hard to, and everybody wants to be wants you to be in a rigid box. You should be this, you should be that, you should be thinking this. Whereas, the real joy of going there and being involved with this novel was saying, I don't know, man, it's complicated. I want to try to understand, and to still have the ability now, years after, studying this for years and reading, so much and meeting so many people, to still say, and I'd also say this about Northern Ireland, Raja, in fact, that I don't know. And that's a good thing to not know, because it means that we're still sort of exploring. The rigidity of knowledge, the rigidity of absolute, quote unquote, truth, is paralyzing us and handcuffing us in so many ways. And I'm much more interested in people who are prepared to scuff the questions up and say, hey, this is not as easy as you think it is. Oh, you're making mistakes. Oh, okay, yeah, and so on. And it's. I think it's important to say that this is ongoing and still sort of mystifying in many ways. And Rami and Bassam say that.
Rami also says that it's a Sisyphean task to create any sort of hope. This is what Rami says. And my question is, have your hopes for what you hoped the book would do been dashed? Do you feel like Rami after writing this book? And maybe you can also say what are the actions you got from Zionist, US Zionists and Israelis and Palestinians to the book.
Yeah, it's been it's been quite the journey. Look, you rolled the rock up the hill for a reason. I knew I was going into territory where I would get I would get some pushback, and I love the pushback, and I think I've gotten some really intelligent pushback, and I've learned a lot from it. If you read the good reviews, you have to read the bad reviews. If you believe the bad reviews, then you have to believe the good reviews. All of these different things that are going on. I will say that I've had an extraordinary reaction from the general reader. I've never had a reaction like this to any book that I've written in my life. I also got a good bit of hammering from different places, and that's fine. I think about it. I think that's kind of wonderful because it opens up the debate in certain ways. I think about Rami and Bassam, and how do they continue going on doing what they're doing when people in schools in Israel want to bar them from coming in? They say, no, Bassam, you can't come in. You're a terrorist. Rami, they have all these things about loathing and so on. But Bassam and Rami, they go to the school gates and they still walk in because they know deep in their hearts that they are the ones who are on the right side of history. And they continue to go in and they continue to face the barrage of criticism and people calling them names and people saying things about them. And they practice what I'm trying to learn is a sort of like intellectual Aikido, right? It's like, so they get names called at them and they sort of bat them away because deep in their heart's core, they know that elementally what they're saying is correct. And I think most of us do too, because they are directed towards the idea of understanding. Is it Sisyphean? Is it like rolling the rock up the hill? Yeah. But what are you going to do? You're going to sit on the rock at the bottom of the hill your whole life? No. So that was it for me. As a writer, I wanted to take it on, even if I knew that it might roll back down on me, and it does, and it will, and it probably will for the rest of my life. But here's the deal: they are not cynical. They have the values of cynicism within them. They are very able. Rami and Bassam are more than able to deal with every cynic who comes along. They throw any question, any history, any idea at them. In the end, they say that the cynic is boring. The cynic is boring because he or she doesn't have any imagination. And they go off and they go off towards hope. I personally think that cynics are sentimental. This drives, Raj, I have to tell you, this drives people balmy. If you tell a cynic that you're sentimental, they're like, how, you can't say something like that. But sentimentality and is different to sentiment. Sentimentality means that you refuse to journey outside your own little idea. And I think that's what cynics do. I think that people who are optimists are actually much more muscular, much tougher, much more able to withstand the violence of opinion because they have this little thing called hope. That's hovering around. And for all the difficulties that these two men face, and these organizations, like these Palestinian organizations that these Israeli organizations, these guys breaking the silence and B'Tselem and all these others, they know in the end that they are speaking to an eventual history that will understand that what they did and said was right and human and true and good. And that's what I think gives them energy.
I'm sure that's true. Spielberg, the filmmaker, has bought the rights for your book. Have you discussed how he is going to go about filming it, and would you have an input into that?
Yeah, I mean, that was an extraordinary thing to think that one of the world's greatest filmmakers will get involved. It was also controversial for certain people, and I get it, I understand. And this is delicate, and this is and
because Hollywood has harmed us a lot as Palestinians.
Absolutely,
that's why it's delicate.
Absolutely, and people have brought this up, and they've brought it up correctly. I mean, as an Irish person, I used to see the cliches and stereotypes until we began to own our own cinema and do these things. One of the things that we're doing is that the Aramin family and the El Hanan family are going to be involved in the production. They will get to speak. There will be Palestinian voices. There will be Israeli voices. There will be people from what I would say all sides involved in this. I think it's going to be nuanced. Luke Davies, the Australian screenwriter who wrote Beautiful Boy and Lion, who has no like political skin in the game, but is a gorgeous, gorgeous writer, is going to write the script, and I believe that it will be true, and that it will open things up, and given access to Palestinian voices in particular here, in new ways that often Hollywood has stereotyped. Now's a good chance. Look, things are changing. Look at what's happening on the streets of America now. Look at all these voices, people coming up from underneath. It's time for new voices, and I do believe that in the right hands and in a skilled way, this as a film could really knock some cliches and stereotypes on the head and disrupt the balance. Is it a scary notion? Yeah, but you know what? Nothing is worth doing unless it's difficult. And I believe the people who make this film will embrace that difficulty in profound ways.
Well, if it's done well, it would make a lot of good for the Palestinian and Israeli images. What was the reaction of the book in the US, amongst US Zionists and Israel and the Palestinians?
I have to say that Rami and Bassam came over to New York, and before COVID hit, and we traveled a little bit together. We went down to Pennsylvania, and we went to Boston as well. They got a standing ovation in the 92nd Street Y in New York. And I remember Bassam, like the Palestinian, standing on stage and sort of whispering, saying, he said, "Oh my God, I'm getting a standing ovation here." Because people were there to listen to the radical nature of their message. These men are surprising. They knock people off balance. They're not supposed to be this way. And they have arguments. I mean, I don't know, I try to communicate what their souls, what their spirits, what their lives are like. But when they get confronted by, say, a hardcore Zionist, and Bassam gets cornered in a party, and gets told this, you should hear the way that he talks his way out of it, the way he changes the nature of the conversation, gets the person to look at themselves. Look, this is what literature must do. This is one of the reasons I wrote this story. I want people to look at themselves, be slightly sort of thrown off balance, saying, "Oh, is that so? Let me sort of re-examine things." And this is what the power of poetry can do, and powers of stories and storytelling can do. There are a lot of young people out there who have a lot of power now in their hands. And through stories and storytelling, they will be able to disrupt the comfortable, accepted narratives and say, we've had enough of this. It's time for change. So the reaction at first, some people, like the people who hate the book the most, don't read it. That's yeah. They're very vocal. The most vocal ones about the book are ones who haven't actually read it. They read a review or two, and then they make up their mind about it. I sort of beg people, just give it a chance, read it, and see what happens.
Well, I can say that if you, for any of the audience, if you read the book, you will be very surprised and very gratified, because it's a great, great book. Let's turn to the questions from the audience. And there is a question from Maureen G. And the question is, did you speak with the mothers of the dead children? And if so, what was their view and contributions?
Oh, yeah. I mean, these are extraordinary women. I actually delayed the stories of the women until later in the book. Nurit and Salwa. Nurit is the wife of Rami. Salwa is the wife of Bassam. They are extraordinary people. And Nurit is very involved politically. She has a powerful voice. She's extremely left wing. She gets in a lot of trouble in Israel. Good trouble, healthy trouble. I think she is an amazing, powerful voice. She's a wonderful person. I got to spend time with Salwa too. We sat outside in her home in Jericho with Bassam, and we ate together. We ate meals, and she explained so much of what it felt like to be a Palestinian woman, a Muslim, unlistened to, and what it meant for her to lose her daughter. She is not as overtly political as Bassam, but her, the power of the way that she engages with the memory of her daughter is extraordinary. And, women are the ones who certainly in Northern Ireland, the Women's Coalition, they are the ones who got out and said, "This is it. We've had enough." I have faith that when things come down to it, that it will be women and younger women or older women, doesn't really matter, who are the ones who are going to say, enough. I think of groups like the Masham Watch, which go to the checkpoints, and women in Bethlehem who are like bringing seeds back and local vegetables and teaching children about farming and things like that. Leila Sahor, she's an activist. There are people doing things, and artists like Emily Jasser, doing incredible things to shake things up. And so I have a lot of faith, yes, in the stories of the women.
There's another question from Charlotte. Which writers from both sides of the conflict would you recommend to readers on finishing your book, of course?
He's right here. Raja Shehadeh. I mean, and Raj, I don't say that just because, we get a chance to talk, and it's such an honor for me to talk to you. But for years and years and years, I've been reading your work, and it is the most gracious, the most like beautifully accessible, deeply engaged, intellectual. I mean, for me, that's extraordinary. The work of the poets, whether it be the older generations of poets, the Darwishes or the new Darwishes, like the Najwan Darwish and people like that, who are, at the cutting edge and asking real, strong political questions. There are so many writers, and then in Asaf Gavran, for instance, in Israel, he's asking questions. He wrote that book, the Hilltop, and he steps out into the forum, and he's brave enough to take some of the hits. I do find that often it is within the poets that so much of it can happen, and the fiction writers have to be reckless. Your work nowadays, especially because, you know what, I got to tell you a story. Just today, I got an Arabic translation. I was like, yes, a Lebanese publisher. And I still don't have a publisher in Hebrew, even though it's in Lithuanian, it's in Chinese, it'd be in French and German and all these different things. Writers have to work from a reckless inner need and try in any way possible to get the story out there, because part of it is not giving up. Part of it is, scuffing up, as I say, scuff up the truth in ways. Get your voice in there, make it complicated. Have people say, "Oh, I don't know, I didn't know that," or "Oh, I knew that, but I wasn't able to express it before." Literature is news that stays news, and there's so much good stuff happening, both within Palestine and Israel, and also without as well.
The other question is from Catherine S. And the question is, did the fathers have any control over the final novel? What if they had objected to your imagined account?
Great question. Here's the deal. Yes, they had. I mean, I went to Rami and Bassam, and I said, I'm going to write this novel, and then I went over numerous times, like close to a dozen times, and spent time with them. And sometimes I would read them a section. Like one time I was reading Bassam a section about how he had met his wife, and he was laughing. He says, "Yeah, that's very good. It's even better than the actual truth." And I had mentioned that he had married her after knowing her for 33 days. And he said, no, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. It was 32 days. Mm-hmm. So I did. I talked with them. I told them this is what I wanted to do. The center of the narrative is entirely in their words. So the two sections, 500, Rami section and Bassam section, they spoke every single one of those words to me or to somebody else at some stage in their lives. I put it together in a fabric, in a carpet, and it's there. So their truth is there. The stuff that I imagine, I think is deeply texturally honest. At least I hope so. Now, I sent it to them. I said, please read it and tell me what you need to change. And, Rami eventually read it, but only when it was published. And as I said, Bassam didn't read it, but they trust me. And I think, they had their sons read it. And I think it's honest to their experience. I pray that it's honest to their experience. I will say that I tried everything I possibly could to get it right. And I had scores of readers from Palestine read the book. I had scores of readers from Israel read the book. Sometimes the exact same fact would come into contradiction from one another, and I would have to make a choice, because what is a fact? A fact is a mercenary thing. You as a Palestinian know that more than probably any other people on earth. They manipulate the facts. And they package the facts off to whatever orphanage they want them to go to. But I wanted to get beyond the facts to where the human heart was there. And if I got it wrong, mea culpa, it was my fault. I got it wrong. It was not anything that Rami and Bassam said to me, but I really hope and pray that it was honest and true. And well, it's not up to me to say if it was or not.
This is really a follow-up question, which comes very well after what you've said. It's from MM. How difficult was it to write a book which deals with such immediate people and situations rather than events or people further in the past?
Sorry, can you give me that again?
How difficult was it to write a book which deals with such immediate people and situations rather than events or people further in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean,
good question.
It is a good question. It's a question on every writer's mind. This summer I tried to do a COVID novel. It's abandoned now at this stage because it's so difficult to write something when you're right slap bang in the middle of it. You need distance. You need time. I always thought that you needed at least a decade, Raja, maybe more. But we're living now in what I think is the exponential age, and everything's happened faster. This novel is set in 2016. Published in 2020, and written and finished in 2019. And the questioner is absolutely correct. It's scary to be on the precipice of what is happening right now. Putting a mask in your story is a conscious choice right now. But it was important for me to be close to the edge and for current events to be going on. I mean, I still look at the news from Israel and Palestine, but nothing in the news will change the elemental beauty of what it is that Rami and Bassam are trying to say, which is we need to know one another. And that will always be a fundamental chessboard truth. It's there. There's a million permutations that you can take from it, but this is your chess piece. We need to know each other, across the divides, or the supposed divides.
And the final question, which is also a good one, it's from John K. Why did you choose to write a fictional instead of a non-fictional book? Maybe because you're a novelist.
It's another great question, and I would like to be able to sit down with you and down the Oxford pub right now and go through my ideas of what is fiction and what is non-fiction. If the word fiction actually exists, what is a novel? What is, as we were talking about just a moment ago, what is a fact? I am a novelist. I chose to write this as a novel because I wanted to get into the heads of my characters. And I wanted to imagine what it was like to feel the force of that pain as they went through it. I wanted to see the colors. I wanted to be on the motorbike. I wanted to do all those things. Most of the stuff in the book is actually non-fiction. Nearly everything that you see there is, true. However, for example, I have a Jewish man driving on a motorbike from West Jerusalem to Beit Jala in the morning, and I have a Muslim man driving from Beit Jala to Jericho late at night. That's the fundamental building blocks, as you so eloquently said at the start of this novel. It takes place in 12 hours. In the middle, they meet in a Christian monastery in Beit Jala. Now, Rami and Bassam had seen the monastery, but they'd never been together inside the monastery. The whole novel revolves around the idea that we all sit together, you and I sit together in the monastery, and we listen to the stories of these two men. And then we think about our own stories as they spin out in hundreds of different directions. That's a novelist technique. I think the secret of the novelist is that, he or she actually is more wedded to the facts sometimes than the quote unquote non-fiction writer is. But also for me, I like to feel easy in the harness. I got a harness around me, but I need some room in there. And fiction is the room into which I sort of go. And there are a couple of characters in the book who are sort of made up out of thin air. But in general, I think you take most of that novel and you would call it a hybrid novel. And in the end, and Raja, I think you and I are both aligned on this. In the end, the only thing that matters is the story and the language in which it gets told. So I don't care whether you're writing journalism, and I don't care whether you're writing plays. I don't care whether you're writing poetry or prose. As long as you put the word down in a good way on the page, when you write about being in curfew in Ramallah, when you write about walking in the hills, it doesn't matter to me whether it's fiction or non-fiction. They're both real, and they're both powerful, and I want to live your life. The beauty of fiction or non-fiction, the beauty of writing is that I can step into your life. The fact that I've read every single one of your books is testament to the fact that I want to understand a little bit about what it means to be Palestinian. But really what I'm asking, what does it mean to be human? How can I be there with Raja? And how can Raja be in Dublin with me or in New York with me? And we're all there. We're all complicit. We're all involved. And it's this complicity that makes us, sometimes anxious, but also makes us sometimes proud to know one another. We're all here on this Zoom. There's people from all over the world here. We can do something with the power of this technology in this new sort of moment that we happen to be in, and maybe even a new form of stories and storytelling. Who knows? Yeah, that would be great.
And I think you've succeeded very beautifully in doing a wonderful book, which is also really a hybrid and a very special kind of a novel, which is very important and an important venture and in writing about Palestine, Israel. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for this discussion. And thank you for all our audience who have been listening to this. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please don't forget to visit the festival's wonderful independent online bookshop via the Book Festival website. All events in this special festival are free for everyone, thanks to the generosity of the supporters and sponsors. So if you can, please consider making a donation to the Edinburgh International Book Festival in order that the festival team can continue putting on events for as many people as possible. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you so much.